this session, we're going to look at the benefits and techniques of coaching your team effectively. I'd like to share a quick analogy with you, if I may. Think about your mobile telephone and ask yourself, without turning your phone on, how many people in your telephone you would be able to remember, and in particular, what their telephone number would be. My guess is you would probably struggle to remember more than 4 numbers. Yet, if you asked yourself the same question maybe 10, 15 years ago, before we were so reliant on technology, chances are you would remember more numbers. My point being, it's not that you don't have the ability to remember, why would you? And I think a lot of managers in that sense are like a mobile phone. It's very easy to go up to your manager and ask for the answer, knowing that you'll get that. So think honestly about the people in your team that are, if you like, guilty of this. When they ask you the same questions over again, are we often giving them the same answer? So in this session around coaching, we're going to look at how we can get people to think for themselves without just relying on the simple question, how would you do that? Okay, so let's sort out the terminology before we move on. So at the risk of playing on semantics, there are 2 different approaches, mentoring and coaching. So for the purpose of this exercise, mentoring is where you would give somebody the information, so give them advice or guidance, telling in other words. Whereas what I'm talking about here in terms of coaching is where you actually ask the coachee, the person you're coaching, what their views are, what their opinions are, and how they may approach an exercise. There are several myths around coaching, one of which is that coaching has to be formal, that you have to book a formal meeting room, and so on. The reality couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, arguably the most effective coaching is the so-called corridor conversation, where you just happen to be having a conversation, perhaps in the car on the way back from a meeting. You can do it remotely on the telephone for those of you that are managing remotely, or even just over a canteen. It's important, however, that the environment is correct so that the person that you are coaching feels they can speak freely. In other words, this is a one-to-one session, certainly not in front of a group of people. There are many really effective coaching techniques and models out there. The one that we're going to talk about today is John Whitmore's GROW model, which is one of the most well-known models, I guess. And it falls into 4 categories. So it starts, first of all, with the goal. When we talk about a problem, most of the time we talk about the problem. So what this model does is it turns it on its head and says, rather than talk about the problem, what is it that you would like to happen? So in other words, what is your goal? The second part is reality. So having established what you would like to happen, how realistic is that goal? What's happening in the real world? And do we need to rescope that goal? So what is the goal? What are we looking to achieve? What's the reality? When we get to the third phase, this is where it gets interesting, because this is the kind of the gap between mentoring and coaching. It'll be very tempting at this stage to start hinting at or make suggestions. Do you think it might be a good idea if you? And in the right place, in the right environment, that certainly has its place. Effective coaching, however, is where you would turn it on its head and ask the person you are coaching, what options do you feel are available to you? In other words, what do you think you might do? That's great. However, unless you get to the final part of that stage, which is the wrap up or the will, then the coaching is really, really ineffective. All you've done at this stage is had a chat. The wrap up stage looks at what will actually happen next. So what are you actually going to do? When are you going to do it? What's currently stopping you from doing it? And it's this final W part of the process, the wrap up or will, which really makes this model fantastic and really effective. You may ask yourself, what are the benefits of doing this? The reality is that coaching can be quite timely. It can be quite frustrating, especially if you've got the answer yourself and you've got a million other things that you need to be doing. The long-term benefits are, however, that it will save you time. It'll encourage people to think for themselves. So, for example, if you're going on holiday or you're away from the office for a day, you're not coming back to a barrage of emails. And if you think back to the mobile phone analogy that we looked at the beginning of this session, rather than people simply relying on you, they are actually thinking for themselves. Does So the benefits are far-reaching and wide. For more information on anything you've seen from today, to discuss your views, or indeed to ask for a consultation, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.